Let's see. Yep, I am live. I'm live on Instagram, I'm live on Facebook, and I'm live on LinkedIn and Twitter because why not? So, welcome to Sunday Silver with Hadass, and I'm going to be talking about the accounting of the soul. What on earth does that mean? So, if you are on live, please say hello. Tell me where you're coming in from. If you are watching a replay, welcome, welcome. Put replay, hashtag replay, and tell me when you're watching this and where you're watching it from. And I would love some input from people because it's more fun that way. But regardless, so what does that mean, the accounting of the soul? So it is currently, as of yesterday, the month of Elul, the Hebrew month of Elul, although the word Elul itself is actually Babylonian. But it is the 7th month of the Hebrew calendar. In some, it depends. There's lots of different calendars. So in the biblical calendar, it's the 7th month. In the more common calendar that starts with Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, it is the last month. I don't want to say 12th month because this year actually had 13 months because it was a leap year. Complicated. It's the last month. It's the month before the Jewish New Year, the Day of Atonement, the whole High Holy Days thing. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. I know that there's Jews form a pretty small minority in the world, a very small minority in the world, actually. But there's a rather large other religion that might also be interested in this story about, or question, or conversation about the accounting of the soul, because what does that mean? So if you've heard of the High Holy Days, and if you live in New York, then you might have actually had it off school, which I find totally amazing. But just generally, anywhere where Jews work, very often they will ask to get the High Holy Days off. Now, the High Holy Days is a rather long period of time, but the ones that are most commonly asked for or requested in terms of I need to go to synagogue are the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, which is literally the head of the year or the Jewish New Year, and Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, which is 10 days later on the 10th of the month of Tishrei, also a Babylonian name. It's interesting. In the Torah, none of the months have names because they weren't given names until the Babylonian exile, but they just have numbers. And so it's interesting because Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, the Jewish New Year, is not actually like that name is never mentioned in the Torah. We do have the Day of Atonement on the 10th day of that month. And I just realized Elul is the 6th month, not the 7th month, because Tishrei is the 7th month. That's okay. But so in the Torah, we are told that we have a Day of Atonement, and it is the 10th day of the 7th month, which is Tishrei. And on that day, we are to fast and we are to, literally torture our souls. Although that sounds kind of terrible, but that is a literal translation. You're supposed to fast. You're supposed to really spend time thinking about things that you've not done well in the previous year and atone for them. And then later, there is a mention of the first day of that month, which is just mentioned as a day when you're supposed to blow the shofar. It's a day of remembrance, or a day of remembrance of blowing the shofar. You may have seen it. It's a ram's horn, and it's blown traditionally 100 times on Rosh Hashanah, and then once right at the end of Yom Kippur. And the idea is that in this time, it's an opportunity to consider, to take a look at the year that's passed I mean, I know that a lot of people do this on the civil new year, like January 1st. People will have sort of retrospectives of everything, especially in December when there's not a lot, when a lot of people are on holidays or whatever. You'll find that the radio or TV is full of the greatest hits of the year and so on. So this isn't quite a greatest hits or a top 10 or whatever. What it is an opportunity to actually do some introspection and to consider what you might want to do better in the coming year. And the thing is that the liturgy for the high holidays was mostly created in the medieval period, and it's very beautiful, but it was a really bad time for the Jewish people. The Crusades were happening. There was a lot of violence, a lot of martyrdom. People felt very unsafe. And it was a time when, wasn't exactly a democratic time or a time of where people might have, a social contract with each other. All of that came later. So it was a time with a lot of fear, a lot of violence, and a very autocratic method of governance pretty much everywhere where these things were being made. Well, hello, David. Happy Elul to you. Just talking about the purpose of the high holidays, and in particular, I'm going to talk about Elul because the idea is that you can spend that time doing some introspection. And I was just talking about the liturgy for the high holidays is very patriarchal, very autocratic, very violent, if you will. It's very some abusive parenting going on there. And I always see it as just wait until your father gets home. Thankfully I wasn't raised like that. I hope you weren't either. But it's a concept of in the traditional liturgy that we are children, we are slaves, we are sheep, we are all these things, and basically help us. We need to atone for our sins, and that is a concept that we can do all sorts of things with, because even if you're not into the patriarchy and the idea of a king, never a queen, a king on a throne of judgment deciding, whether you're going to live or die. The fact remains that it's always a good idea to find some time to do some introspection about your life. And it doesn't need to be, you don't need to beat yourself up. You don't need to tell yourself you're a terrible person, and you absolutely do not need to flagellate yourself in any way. When we had the temple, if you had done something that you shouldn't, then you could just go to the temple and bring a sacrifice. And then you did have to make a confession of what you had done. You couldn't just buy your way out of it. But basically, once you had brought the sacrifice, once you had made confession of what you had done wrong, the slate was wiped clean and you were all good. And when the temple was destroyed, then that avenue of atonement was gone. And so there was this incredible radical project of the creation of Judaism after the destruction of the temple. And so the rabbis really went into rebuilding the structure and so on. And a lot of people think that that's all there is to Judaism, is the structure and the rules and the law, and you have to follow the rules exactly, otherwise you're a bad person. No, that's not really how it works. Even for the most stringent, ultra-Orthodox, whatever, they also see the commandments, the mitzvot, the rules that we follow to one degree or another. It's I saw somebody call it a spiritual technology. I think it was Rabbi Arthur Green. That sounds like the sort of thing he would say. It's a spiritual technology to facilitate our connection to the divine. And if, patriarchal liturgy, our Father, our King, doesn't do it for you, there's lots of other parts and other things you can do in this system to be able to facilitate that. And there's really three things that you might want to think about, especially as we come into the month of Elul. Whether you're Jewish or not, it doesn't matter. It's always a good time to do some introspection. Three things that we think about, and one is our connection to ourselves. And you can ask yourself some question about that. Were you kind to yourself? Did you keep your word to yourself? Did you do the things that you said you were going to do? If you said you were going to work out, did you work out? If you said you were going to eat well, did you do that? How about sleep? I have to tell you, this is an issue for me. And one of the things I really am planning to do in the new year, actually before that, but definitely something to think about, is making sure I get enough sleep, because, getting older and I just can't get away with sort of sleep deprivation that I used to. So there's that. How did you treat yourself? And then another question is, how did you treat other people? Did you keep your word to other people? Did you do what you said you would do? Were you kind to other people? Were you compassionate? Did you hold space for people to be themselves and not necessarily project onto them your expectations and get mad at them if they didn't live up to them? There's a lot to unpack in the whole question about interaction between humans. And one of the interesting things about the high holidays is that it's a very communal thing. You can do it by yourself, but you're not supposed to. And it's interesting that people who otherwise don't bother to go to synagogue for these 3 days, they often will, because they just feel this urge to gather, to be in community. And if you look at that liturgy that I've been complaining about, it's all in the plural. Like, there's these whole lists of terrible things. And I remember as a kid reading them and saying to my mother, but I haven't done any of those things. Why am I confessing this? And so she did point out a couple of things, like there was one that was having to do with being disrespectful to parents and teachers that she felt a need to point out to me every year. But that's an aside. But just the whole idea that we're there as a community and we are confessing on behalf of everybody. And it doesn't mean that everyone has done these things, but we are a community and everyone is part of this process. Even people who have done terrible things are part of the process. That's what we have, for example, in the Kol Nidre, which is, on the eve of the Day of Atonement. There's this very famous ritual in which we grant permission to pray with those who have transgressed. So we are all humans. We've all made mistakes. We've all done things that we shouldn't, and we can pray together. So first one, what was your relationship like with yourself? The second one, what was your relation like with other people? Were you kind? Were you compassionate? Were you trustworthy? All of those things. And then the third one has to do with the relationship between humans and the divine. And that's where a lot of people go in different directions. Some people are very comfortable with anthropomorphic depictions of the king on the throne and so on. Other people, not so much. So, but the fact remains that if you have any sort of connection with whatever source of being we have out there, then it's something that you need to think about. It's, just every relationship needs nurturing. And even if you're most comfortable with the idea that there isn't really a personality or something to have a relationship with, think about the world, our beautiful natural world that we're destroying. That is something to have a relationship with, for sure. And it doesn't have to be a supernatural being riding on a chariot of fire or sitting on a throne or whatever anthropomorphism people have created. And whatever you're comfortable with is whatever works. But what matters is that you maybe make a little space in your life, in your thoughts, in your introspection, to be thinking about your relationship with whatever it is that's out there. Like I said, whether you want to call it nature or the universe or the divine or God or whatever you want to call it, it's something that, even if you say, well, there is absolutely nothing, that is still a relationship. And if that's what you're determining, then that's fine. Everybody needs to do this for themselves. But the important thing is that you make a little space. So these are the three areas really that we think about during the month of Elul, as in preparation for the coming high holidays. And every year it's an opportunity to consider where we've been, where we're going, what do we want to do better. Don't beat yourself up. That's not what it's about. It's about trying to make things better. So I am going to wrap this up now. If you are, as I said, if you're live, say hello. If you're watching a replay, also say hello. Maybe tell me, #replay. And I'll be seeing you again next week. Talk to you again soon.